Good evening. Welcome to our evening of art and light. We're so glad that you're here with us to celebrate the wonderful tapestries that we have. At this time, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Adeer Glick. Rabbi had some discussions and a fair amount of input with Barrett when deciding on what the tapestries would be. And with that said, I'd like to hand over the mic to Rabbi Glick.
Thank you. Chag Sameach. Thank you all again for coming tonight. And to thank Barrett for her wonderful tapestries and to the anonymous donor who brought this artwork to us. Thank you. And words of introduction, because we are bringing into our temple community and our congregational family another display of public Jewish art. And our synagogue has a history of connection to Jewish art. We have our Milton Horn sculptures, our Gropper windows, and now we have our Berit Engen tapestries. Jewish art has always been more than just about beautifying a space. And we believe that art has the power to channel the very creative powers of the universe. And the art is one of the mediums that tells our Jewish story. And the first Jewish artist was Bezalel. Bezalel and his helpers created the tabernacle, the Mishkan, in the wilderness. And the Midrash portrays Bezalel, this first Jewish artist, creating the tabernacle while harnessing the powers of the 7 days of creation. And the Torah tells us that Bezalel was handed chokhmah, bina, udat, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And that he used these skills to create a worship space. And we believe that our Jewish art and the new tapestries are also helping us worship and create a beautiful space and a beautiful building. And they reflect back to us the stories of where we come from and where we're heading, and joining millennia-long discussions of Torah and devotion to Torah. And Barrett very consciously made her art part of that conversation of meaning. And that brings all of us into the art, because we're also then part of that long chain of meaning. And so the tapestries enrich our space, but they also engage us in that conversation, in that dialogue, in that interpretation, and they invite us, as you'll see if you spend time looking at them and understanding the richness that they portray, to embark on our own journeys, on our own thoughts of revelation. The foundational story that they tell, that Barrett has interpreted through these, is that of the freed slaves who had already left Egypt and crossed the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea, and they were now being called to worship at Mount Sinai and meet the God who had freed them from Egypt. And then onwards to their encounter and to their revelation that becomes a starting point of our Jewish religion, our Jewish faith, and where we come from. In that sense, they tell a story that is the starting point of where our Jewish wisdom begins, both as a people and individually in that moment of revelation. So I'd like to also share a few words of introduction to Barrett. I will not repeat her full bio that can be found in the program tonight, but what I'd like to say is that Barrett is a friend of Har Zion, a local Jewish artist who has a unique art and who is making a unique contribution to Jewish art based on her Norwegian weaving traditions, and an honored member of our local Jewish community in Oak Park, River Forest. And we're so pleased to have so many friends from Oak Park Temple here with us tonight as well. So just one brief highlight from her bio in the program, that she has been doing this since she was a child and is now doing it expounding on Jewish texts. Her ongoing project, Weft and Drash, 1,000 Jewish Tapestries, begun in 2007, consists to date of about 600 pieces. And in the pieces that we'll see tonight, she is telling the story of Revelation. We're so grateful for you being able to bring these to us and enriching our space and bringing new energy into our space, into our front foyer. So please join me in welcoming and honoring Berit Engen. As she goes more into depth and tells us her whole process surrounding these tapestries.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, and Chag Sameach, and thank you to everyone who made this evening possible and beautified it. The space itself is just stunning. I was given permission by the Rabbi to take off my mask, and I would like to do so because I know there are many people here that I don't really know. I don't would like to see you. I assume you would like to kind of see a face and not a mask while I'm talking. So if this is okay with you, this is how I will be standing up here. And it feels special in these times. And anyway, I will go to the first slide here. So each of the 10 tapestry themes were carefully selected. They had to present an outline, challenge concepts, and I needed to find a visual expression that hopefully would draw people in and inspire discussions about the story's relevance in our own time. Before I started to weave, I needed the topics to be selected, and I have great memories from meeting with Rabbi Glick and from discussing with the donor and Laurel Salzman, who was the Har Zion president at the time. We did a couple of rounds of me presenting my ideas, which were based on their requests, and then they would approve or make suggestions to changes. Once we had a plan, it was up to me to work on color selections and expressions for each tapestry. I work in a rather organic way. A visual plan, even when it's on paper, is only a plan, and it will change as I weave. As you can see in this slide here, where I have my two sketches to the tapestry with the golden calf. So let's start the journey. Miriam and the women lifted their timbrels and danced after the miraculous crossing of the Sea of Reeds. It was wisely requested by Har Zion that I use strong colors, but I decided to use gray for the desert, for Mount Sinai, and for the tablets. Thus, the three stone-related objects and ideas would stand out by being a mere contrast to the vibrant hues. Like here, where Sinai is shining in the distance, symbolizing God's plan of having the Israelites accept the covenant. I decided to use the color crimson for the Israelites in the 5 tapestries in which they are depicted. Thus, I used color to resolve the tension between weaving recognizable elements from the story and abstract expressions that invite the imagination. The tambourines are woven in techelet, which is a blue color mentioned in the Tanakh. Here, techelet symbolizes freedom from slavery and survival of escape. So what exactly does the precious color Techelet look like? We don't really know, since it has not been produced for centuries. It has been described both as indigo and as turquoise. It takes a mountain of snails from a specific place in the Mediterranean Ocean to produce just a few ounces of dye. It was reserved for priestly garments and Mishkan decorations. It is the only color that I have woven in all 10 tapestries. In each tapestry, it depicts a specific object, event, or concept central to the Sinai narrative. And I've chosen to be in that when I refer to Techelet, I mean it as a darker indigo. God performed miracles during the wandering. Water appeared, and food, manna at dawn, and quail in twilight. I thought that miracles needed to be part of the series. In our time, we struggle with the concept of divine intervention. It implies more than having faith. I chose to weave the falling manna as cream-colored rectangles and squares, and the moving quails on the ground as curved shapes. Decisions like these were entirely mine. I would show them to the donor and Laurel one by one as I completed them. And I was very happy, of course, when they really liked what I made. Now, if I'd failed on one tapestry, I always could make another one. It takes me about 2 weeks to complete one 18-inch by 6-inch tapestry. It is very slow work, but of course I could fail. And if I did, that would be okay. And you've seen from my sketches that things are not always clear in my head when I weave. But I draw inspiration from the text itself. Let's see. So here, Techelet, as a symbol of God miracles, is mixed in with the blue quails on the ground, and a few specks are falling down with manna. I chose to not weave the water. The tapestries, being relatively small, they're woven with double threads for added texture and vibrancy in colors, and that leaves very little room for including details. I generally have to, and I enjoy simplifying the story and create a more minimalistic expression. The Amalekites, with the intent to wipe out the Israelites, who then went to war in self-defense. This was so the Amalekites attacked with that intent. And this was the first time that the Israelites fought and won a war without God's assistance. Imagine what it did to their self-image and pride. The swords shine, embraced in light, yet there are trembling lines on the lower left side, because the act of killing can be frightening, messy, and ugly. Techelet is barely visible in the victorious tapestry, and it's woven as just a few single stitches. Their modest appearance represents God's absence, but the fact that they are included symbolizes that God, in spite of his absence, had a plan. The Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai, where they watched with awe and fear the lightning tear the heavens and could not escape the blast of the shofarot. The mountain is woven in two fighting gray nuances, the darker one flowing into the green. The overwhelming lightning and sound are woven into Techelet. This is God's presence as the people sense it. Lightning is, of course, not blue, and sound does not have a color. I used the shape of the shofar as a shape for sound. I added thin yellow stripes on the mountain top crossing over to the green, indicating that something is happening in that space. The meeting place of the incomprehensible heaven and the tangible rock, or of God and man. And here the intentionally small crimson lines are the Israelites at the foot of the mountain. But here, they blast into taking center stage as community, as the multi-nuanced crimson is the background color. The Israelites showed their commitment to the Torah when they proclaimed at Sinai, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. Why first observe the laws of the Torah and then study them? The opposite order seems to be much more logical, and it is how we live our lives and what we teach to our children. It is a difficult concept for us, but I chose to weave it in a positive light. Maybe Judaism would have stopped up right here, were it not for this decision to move forward without questions. But basic to the proclamation is, of course, an unwavering belief and a trust in God as the Redeemer. Although the Israelites here appear as shapeless individuals, I wanted to stress the notion that it is as community that we can change the world. Our commitment to the law is woven as a mythical, techelet-colored Mount Sinai. I think I'm going to just go back to this slide here, which I skipped, because the reason I put it in there is to point out how in the foyer, these two red tapestries, there's one on each side of the door into the sanctuary. When you open the door and you look in, you look at the ark. And it just felt right to go with the space rather than just the tapestries itself, that I had to consider the space. This was a commission. I'm supposed to enhance the space. It's also supposed to be meaningful, and I felt that this was a way to honor the beauty of the building. So, here is a picture of me weaving one of the red Na'aseh v'nishma tapestries. You can see all I need is a frame and a fork. This is my grandmother's silver fork with her initials engraved into it. And then I need good shoes, and since you have seen my sketches, you probably understand why I need good shoes, because when I say that it keeps my thinking focused. And then I need beautiful yarn. This is Scandinavian linen yarn. Okay. So, next tapestry. Then God gave us Shabbat, the day of rest, to be observed by every generation in any place we might reside. Abraham Heschel's description of Shabbat as a palace in time inspired the tapestry's floating setting. Thanks to Rabbi Glick, Shabbat got included in the series, even as a separate tapestry. I had read the story several times. The Sinai story is really confusing. There is more than one writer in the Torah. It goes back and forth. And after reading it, and I didn't think of Shabbat. So when Rabbi Glick suggested it, I was, of course, first surprised. But then I admit it. it makes such sense. Sinai is about becoming a nation with a constitution. Shabbat is the beautiful, artistic glue that forever keeps it all together. As the writer Ahad Ha'am famously said, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. What does Shabbat look like? At that time, it certainly did not look like a Kiddush cup, 2 candlesticks, and a loaf of challah. So why not weave it like a bird or a flower or a piece of the creation? Since God invented Shabbat to be a holy ritual, we beautify the day of rest with intent or kavanah, as I try to do in the blue background. In his anger over creating a false, in his anger of our creating, or the Israelites creating a false god, Moses broke the first set of tablets, woven here as gray shards. He destroyed the golden calf, and it disappeared as dust in a stream. On both sides of the tapestry are gray-colored hints of the second set of tablets that Moses brought down from the mountaintop. At this historic low point, God could have given up on the Israelites and searched for another covenant-willing tribe. Instead, God declared his 13 attributes of mercy. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Nachum. Adonai, Adonai, God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and yes, you know the 13 attributes, I'm sure. I chose to weave in a rather quiet-looking tapestry these 5 dramatic consecutive events as if they took place all at once, suggesting a powerful connection between these emotional and historically consequential episodes. On the topic of gray, as the mountain now is the background, I wanted it to vibrate with gray nuances woven in thin streams from the top, alluding to Moses' presence. I chose to not weave Moses himself. It's a little bit like in the Haggadah, where Moses is not present. Throughout the series, I want to focus on the people and on God's plan. But the images of the ruined calf and the broken tablets bring Moses to our mind. And by the way, by the time the calf was in the stream, it was all made into, or changed into dust. But in the tapestry, if I didn't weave the calf and just changed it to small specks of orange, the tapestry would lose its visual power. The biggest challenge in this tapestry was the rabbi's heartfelt suggestion that I included the 13 attributes of God. How in the world was I going to weave this abstract idea as a recognizable expression? I chose to weave 13 horizontal lines with stitches interchellet, set off by stitches in golden ochre for beauty, and then they are all going to the top of the tapestry as a ladder. Through giving an extremely detailed building and decoration plan for the Mishkan, and through assigning artisans Bezalel and Oholiab, God ensured that high-quality craftsmanship, beautiful and enduring materials, and artistic visual expressions would receive utmost attention. It is in this story that the important Techelet is first mentioned, and naturally in this tapestry, it is the very backdrop to the story. When I'm reading all the instructions and all the attention that is paid to beauty, Har Zion comes to my mind. The project was huge. The project of building the Mishkan was huge and employed every Israelite, and each one donated awe-inspiring materials as requested. Thus, God made sure we participated fully and with emotional investment in the construction of the portable temple. So God, needing solid partners to fulfill the plan of complete shalom, of redemption, God reinforced our commitment through a hands-on art project. It sounds like a preschool. And maybe sometimes we as adults need to think a little preschool, like getting in touch with instincts, and just put our hands on things and maybe even walk around in the mud. I wove the Mishkan as a man-made, planned geometric constructions with different levels of holiness. And the pomegranate, with its many seeds, is a symbol of the 613 commandments. By adding this enlargement of the holies of holies in the Mishkan and including the pomegranate, I emphasize that the most important treasure is the Torah itself. We ritually remember the revelation in the festival of Shavuot, and so the tapestry series ends with the burst of green and light of God's creation in spring. The crimson shapes, symbolizing people, resemble the basic stroke of Hebrew letters. We are what we read. We have internalized the law, and the glowing Mishkan on the ground hints to all the houses of worship that have been built throughout the ages, not because God needed them, but because we do. The Rabbi taught me that according to the mysticism of, or mystical teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, there is another Mishkan in our heart. And now I think, not here necessarily, but from now into the future, when you visit the temple, I think it's time for you to do your own interpretations. Thank you.
Barrett, thank you for such an enlightening discussion or talk. Laurel, our past president, and a number of other congregants wanted to make the foyer warmer and more welcoming. The idea was proposed to commission artwork at the entrance to the sanctuary. Rabbi Glick helped to define the vision of the artwork. Of course, Barrett was the chief visioner of all of the artwork. The group immediately thought of you, Barrett. We appreciated your artwork, that you were a local Jewish artist, that the project was intricate, detailed, and thrilling. We thank you for your insight, your artistic vision, and the gift our temple will have in perpetuity. I present this plaque that says, Mount Sinai on Route 43, from the shore of the sea to the Mishkan in our hearts. Berit Engen, 1955, dedicated by the congregation of the Temple Har Zion on the seventh night of Hanukkah, Kislev 30, 5782, December 4th, 2021. On the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. Exodus 19:1. Thank you very much.